Welcome back to teleSUR English. We go live to Cuba at this moment. Let's see the images as the nation is receiving with honors the remains of the 32 fallen collaborators who lost their lives in the attack that was perpetrated by the United States against Venezuela with the purpose of kidnapping President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. We are looking at the first honorary ceremony that is taking place at the José Martí International Airport at this moment. Let's recall this is the return to their home of the 32 fallen collaborators from Cuba, victims of the U.S. imperialist attack against Venezuela. Let's listen to a little bit of what is happening. The José Martí International Airport, let's recall, Cuba is receiving and honoring in this first ceremony in a day that will be dedicated to the honor and glory of this 32 fallen combatants, heroes of the Cuban nation that were killed in the U.S. imperialist attack against Venezuela of January 3rd, an attack that had as its main purpose and led to the kidnapping of President of Venezuela Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. These 32 Cuban combatants were part of the defense of Venezuelan sovereignty and Latin American sovereignty at that moment, and these 32 heroes died at that moment are now being returned to their nation, and they're being received at this moment. These are live images from the International Airport José Martí in the Cuban capital of Havana. This is the first ceremony that we are looking at, a day that will be dedicated to their honor.
su lugar de jefe.
Family members of our 32 heroes, compatriots, in this solemn morning, the homeland hurts and rises. We gather to receive on our soil brothers that fell far from their home, but not from their duty. As we receive their mortal remains, we renew before them the oath of loyalty to the homeland, to the unity of the peoples of Latin America. We affirm from the very first moment, with the clarity that history demands, we do not receive them with resignation. We do it with a lot of proud and eternal commitment. And we know, because the people of Cuba has learned this in the hardest trials, that death does not defeat those who fall with a rifle at hand defending a just cause. They do not return to us as shadows. On the contrary, they are a new light that reinforces and commit us. They return covered by the flag, and that flag does not represent an absence. It consecrates an eternal presence. It brings with them the undying example of courage, devotion, loyalty to the most noble values of man. When they crossed sky and sea to fulfill their mission, they knew that to not return was a possibility. Were firmly convinced that they would never betray these people, that following the example of their heroes, learned to share their luck with everyone else. In those difficult times, when in the early hours of January 3rd, the treacherous aggression overshadowed Venezuela, our combatants were there, loyal to Fidel, to Raúl, to the party, and to the legacy of internationalism that has marked all stages of the Cuban Revolution. Venezuela was not for them a distant land. It was the elongation of the homeland, as it was for our founding fathers. There come together Bolivar and Martí, Chavez and Fidel, and all those that dreamt of a united and free Latin America. They fell fighting and rose forever to history. There, where violence wanted to impose silence, their blood wrote once more a truth that never anyone will be able to erase. Cuba does not abandon its sons, does not renounce its principles. Cuba does not surrender, although to defend dignity has to pay a painful price. Our brothers fought with the same decision of Mambises from as well as from the generation of the centenary, as well as the bearded fighters and the militiamen in Bay of Pigs, and the international combatants that proved that a mission from other lands can only return with friendship of their brotherly people and the sacred remains of the fallen. Compatriots, family members, receive our fighting brothers in their homeland that saw them grow. With the pride that we know that they did not surrender, they didn't hesitate, they fought to the last bullet and offered their life to fulfill the mission. In front of them, in front of their family members, before history and before you, Army General, we proclaim that in Cuban land there will be never a space for cowardice and betrayal. Every combat will carry the fingerprints of these heroic combatants that gave everything for the dignity of the people. They died the way they lived, with their head held high. They felt convinced that they were fulfilling a sacred duty, that the people of Latin America will know how to recognize and will forever be grateful for their supreme example of sacrifice and loyalty. Today, when their names are written forever in the altar of the homeland, we do not promise rest, because true heroes do not rest ever. They will continue walking at the forefront of every battle, accompanying every young decided to serve its people, inspiring every man and woman that does not surrender before injustice, giving strength to all revolutionary fighter that knows how to stand up after every blow. The enemy speaks highly of high precision strikes, of elite troops, of supremacy. We in turn talk about faces of family members, families that have lost a father, a son, a wife, a brother. We talk about children that will have to grow up without the hugs of those that gave their life thinking precisely on them. Before those children, before those mothers, husbands and wives, we make ours once more those heartfelt words of Commander-in-Chief. We cannot say that the pain is shared, the pain is multiplied. Millions of Cubans today cry together with the loved ones of the victims of the abominable crime, and when a courageous people cry, injustice trembles. The homeland bows before you with respect and gratitude. Your dead are our dead, and that silent pride to know that you provided the best that you have to the most just cause is also the pride of an entire people. Before you, before the people, we reaffirm that if something has been proven in this painful page of the history, is that imperialism might have more sophisticated weapons. They might have immense material wealth. They might buy the mind of those that quivers, but there is something that they will never be able to buy: the dignity of the Cuban people. Peoples are not great due to their material wealth, but for their capacity to keep alive the memory of its heroes. We will never forget them. We will remember them always, in every effort, in every challenge, in every victory. Their example will guide the path of the free people of the world. Brothers, today we receive you turned into heroes. You are an example of honor, a lesson for those that quiver. You are a warning for those that threaten. Eternal glory to the fallen ones in the homeland of Bolivar and Chavez. Honor and eternal glory to the heroes and martyrs of the homeland. The Cuban people embraces you, always until victory.
Those were the words of the Minister of the Interior of Cuba, Lázaro Álvarez Casas. We are looking at images from Havana, the official ceremony, the initial ceremony honoring the 32 fallen combatants, martyrs of the U.S. imperialist attack in Venezuela. At this moment, they are being returned to their homeland, to Cuba. And this is the beginning of that ceremony, in this case being received at the International Airport José Martí in Havana. We were listening to the Minister of the Interior dedicate a few words. He was saying the imperialism may have stronger weapons, but they can never defeat the dignity of Cuban soldiers in this case. Cuban soldiers that also fell in the name of the defense of one of the most important and core values that Cuba has always stood for, the defense of the right of sovereign peoples, of Latin American peoples to self-determination, the defense of the possibility of these nations to building their own future away from any interventionist intentions. Let's recall that these 32 combatants from Cuba fell in the attacks that took place on January 3rd in Venezuela, and that led to the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, at the moment prisoner of war in the United States, and also First Lady and member of the Venezuelan National Assembly, Cilia Flores. Honor and glory, those are the words of the day as Cuba is receiving the bodies of the 32 fallen combatants, those collaborators who died during the U.S. attack on Venezuela, as we were saying. Today, Cuba is honoring its heroes, those who died in the defense, as we were saying before, of one of the core values that Martí's nation has maintained and promoted for decades, being a beacon for the entire region, the independence and the sovereignty of Latin American and Caribbean in the face of these imperialist aggressions and imperialist forces. The right to self-determination, the right to choose its own destinies without interventions. We will continue following this relevant day in Cuba, a day of mourning and a day of honor as well, as we see at this moment images of the ceremony that just took place. We were saying the beginning of a day of ceremonies that is meant to honor the fallen combatants, the fallen collaborators from Cuba that were there on Venezuelan soil at the moment of the illegal, illegitimate attack, an attack by the United States against Venezuela that has been described by international analysts, experts, members from the United Nations as against international law, an attack that had the purpose and that led to the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela in an unprecedented move. A president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, that is now being held hostage as prisoner of war in the United States alongside First Lady and also member of the National Assembly of Venezuela, Cilia Flores, in that attack, an attack that took place not only only in the capital Caracas, but also in the states of Miranda, of Aragua, of La Guaira, an attack that left over 100 people dead, at least, in Venezuela, that the United States tried to show as a specific attack. And then with the hours that went by, we saw the casualties, the impact and consequences both on military and civilian infrastructure. And among the consequences of that attack were the death of these 32 heroes that Cuba is now receiving at its homeland. We were seeing just the images that we have on screen right now are from just moments ago in the international airport of Havana, the international airport José Martí. This is just the beginning of the ceremony. We were listening to the words of the Minister of the Interior, who received them with honors. Now they are traveling, as we see on screen. This is the road from the international airport. Let's recall images from Havana. The road from the international airport towards the Minister of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. During that whole journey, as we see people standing alongside the roads with the aim of paying tribute to honoring the lives of these 32 heroes, 32 combatants that were killed by the U.S. military forces at the imperialist attack that took place on January 3rd. We recall we are looking at images at this moment, images from the Cuban capital. We were just seeing the first ceremony. The fallen soldiers were received at the international airport José Martí, greeted by the words of the Minister of the Interior of Cuba, who was paying homage to the importance of that deed that led, sadly, to the death of these 32 combatants. But he was saying that a Cuban combatant that falls in its duty to defend its homeland, and the homeland that includes the entire Latin American region, is falling, in this case, away from its homeland, but not away from its duty. One of the core values, we were saying, Cuba has for decades stood for not only the defense of the region, but also international solidarity. And this day is also speaking on the international collaboration and solidarity between the peoples of Cuba and Venezuela that has been so significant and so important to understand the last decades and the continuation of both revolutionary projects in the face of the intensification of imperialist aggressions. Of course, Cuba, that has been the target of a U.S. blockade for decades. And Venezuela also in the last decade has been target of sanctions, and of course the most recent attack at this moment, the one that led to the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro. Even in that context, in Venezuela, we're looking at an institutionality that stands with acting President Delcy Rodriguez, that continues not only to maintain the Bolivarian project, but also to maintain the claim for the return of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. And in Cuba, we see a people that continue to maintain its own project and its core value of supporting that collaborative effort and the action of these 32 heroes, Cuban heroes that fell during this U.S. attack against Venezuela, is a testimony and an image of that. Honor and glory are the words of the day. These are the words that are marking a moment of memory and of honor of these 32 fallen combatants. Let's recall, we're looking at the images. We were just seeing images of Havana. This is taking place at this moment. The remains of the 32 Cuban heroes were received at the airport. Now they are being moved towards the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. We are looking at images from the streets of Havana as we see the road that leads from one point to the other, all part of the ceremony to honor the 32 combatants. In the last hours, we also heard that the 32 Cuban heroes were promoted in their military rank in recognition of their deed and the moment in which they gave their life for the defense of Venezuelan sovereignty, that, as we were saying, is also part of the defense of the Cuban revolutionary project. A revolutionary project that from its very beginnings understood that such a project needed to include the solidarity with sovereign nations from the South, and particularly sovereign nations from Latin America and the Caribbean. And in that context, the permanent brotherhood of solidarity with sister nation Venezuela has been so important, marked by the relationship between Commander Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, a relationship that not only marked the past and present of both nations, Cuba and Venezuela, and that played such an important role up until this very moment, the attack, the flagrant attack that we witnessed just days ago from the United States against Venezuela, but a relationship between both historic leaders of the revolution in Cuba and the Bolivarian revolution in Venezuela, the legacy of Martí and Bolívar, that also marked the continent and the region as a whole. Let's recall that from that solidarity effort came ALVA, that continues to be a coalition that stands for the projects of the region and for the peoples of the region in defense of their sovereignty, in defense of the right to self-determination, particularly and precisely against actions that on January 3rd of 2026 crossed a new red line, the first bomb attack from an imperialist nation, in this case from the United States, against Latin American territory with one purpose, and that purpose was to kidnap the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. And at that moment, these 32 Cuban combatants gave their life in their attempt to defend the right of Venezuelan people to continue to stand strong in the face of that imperialist aggression. Even though the United States kidnapped the constitutional leader of the nation, at this moment we see a Venezuela that continues to stand strong, that continues to maintain an institutionality, that has initiated the sessions of its National Assembly, that has brought its claim for the constitutional president and first lady to be returned home, that has mobilized its own people both in the city and other parts of the country, and continue with permanent demonstrations showing the people's support and rejection of the imperialist aggression. We see a Venezuela that has received the international support from major partners. And the fact that that is the situation in Venezuela today, even though the United States targeted it with the most fierce attack that Latin America and the Caribbean region has seen, is also due to the action of these 32 Cuban heroes who gave their life for the defense of the sovereignty, for the defense of the region against the attack perpetrated by the United States. We were saying were images from Havana after the mortal remains of the 32 Cuban combatants, the 32 Cuban heroes, have been returned from Venezuela. Cubans who were killed in the U.S. attack that took place on January 3rd. And at this moment, after different acts of solidarity took place both in Venezuela and in Cuba, we are seeing the mortal remains of these heroes being brought back home. What we were seeing just moments ago was the initial ceremony. That initial ceremony took place at the International Airport of Havana, Jose Marti International Airport, where the Minister of the Interior managed to speak a few words to the honor of these fallen combatants that are now being received at their homeland. He was saying that even though they fell in their duty, they continue honoring and continue to honor the true core value of Cuba, that is solidarity and that is the defense of self-determination. Let's recall that we are looking at the images from Havana, and that one of the main purposes of this day of honor and glory, a day of mourning, but also a day of remembering and getting to know who these 32 heroes that are going on to Cuban and Latin American history are. We will also be using this day to acknowledge these 32 combatants that are now being taken to the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba as we see their journey. We are also looking at the people on the streets that are coming out to see. We see the Cuban flags. These are the 32 heroes being received in their homeland. Captain Adrián Pérez Beades, one of the 32 fallen heroes. He was born in 1991 in the province of Pinar del Río. In September of 2024, he had been designated to accomplish a special service in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and fell heroically in January 3rd in the fulfillment of that mission. Soldier Adelkis Ayala Almenares. We were also going over the different fallen combatants that are being honored at this moment. We were saying Soldier Adelkis Ayala Almenares, born in 1980, another of the combatants that fell at this moment, January 3rd. They were assigned special missions in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and were victims of that U.S. imperialist attack that took place days ago and that marked a moment of no return. There is, for Latin America and the Caribbean, a moment before and after that bombed attack against Venezuela, against different points in Venezuela. For the past days, we've been seeing the consequences and the impacts of those explosions, of that bombing, also the significance of the fact that for the first time, a people of Latin America is waking up to a bomb attack at hands of the United States. And in the defense of that attack and in the defense of the right of that people to continue maintaining their self-determination and their political project and their right to decide its own destiny, was Cuba as one of its main collaborators and defenders of that Latin American sovereignty, and these 32 heroes who gave their life at this moment. We're looking at images from just moments ago. Again, moments ago, in which the 32 heroes from Cuba were received at the international airport, and the images that we have on screen right now are the images from the journey that is taking them from the airport to the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the ceremonies will continue. We're looking at some images, again, we reiterate, from moments ago, as their mortal remains are being taken to the next step in this day of ceremony, in this day that is both a day of mourning and a day of honoring for Cuba and the Cuban people, in the memory of these 32 combatants that fell in defense of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We're saying that it's also a day to honor and get to know the stories behind this 32 combatants that gave their life for the mission that was assigned to them in order to defend the sister nation of Venezuela. Soldier Alexander Noda Gutierrez, a militant of the Communist Party of Cuba. He was born in 1977 in Cocos de Uñas in the province of Holguín, with a standing trajectory as a student. We are looking now at live images. We're talking about the trajectory of soldier Alexander Noda Gutierrez. For 30 years, he was an active service and member of the Revolutionary Armed Forces with an exemplary attitude. And for his merits, he was assigned a special mission and a special service for the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, where he fell during that mission on January 3rd, 2026, alongside his compatriots as well, alongside over 100 people that were victims of the U.S. attack. We're looking at images at this moment from Havana, live images at this moment, as we continue to follow the journey that is taking the mortal remains of the 32 combatants that fell on that fatidic night of January 3rd, the night that also led to the kidnapping of the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, opening a new stage of relations in terms of the international powers, a new stage in which a Latin American president is being held hostage as prisoner of war in the United States, a completely unprecedented situation opened by this attack, a stage in which, however, Venezuela continues to maintain its institutionality, its social and public life, its demonstrations on the streets of people claiming for the return of the president, and that was because of these fallen soldiers of Cuba who gave their life. Now let's listen to our correspondent in Havana, Isabel. Let's listen to what she is reporting from the site.
Nuestra presidenta encargada, Delcy Rodríguez, una mujer con mucha experiencia de gobierno.
En este contexto también se llevó a cabo la constitución de la Comisión Permanente de las Familias, Libertad de Religión y de Cultos, que la preside el diputado Jorge Arriaza con el objetivo de desarrollar normas y herramientas legales necesarias para proteger al pueblo y la soberanía nacional.
Que ya tiene un trabajo,
images from Havana. In this journey that is taking the bodies and remains of these 32 combatants, 32 Cuban heroes. We were trying to make contact with our correspondent, Isabel, in Havana. We have different teleSUR teams on site at this moment, continuing, following and reporting on this special day for Cuba, a day of honoring, a day of mourning as well, but specifically a day of getting to know and paying tribute to these 32 fallen combatants that gave their life in the fulfillment of their assigned missions, that gave their life for the defense of the sovereignty of the entire region, and in particular, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We continue to look at images from just moments ago. We were saying the remains of the 32 fallen combatants that were killed by the U.S. attacks on Venezuela of January 3rd. They are being taken at this moment. They're being taken from the international airport, Jose Marti, where they were received with the greatest honors. We heard from the Minister of the Interior at this moment paying tribute to the accomplishment of their missions for which they gave their life. And now they're being taken in this journey throughout the Cuban capital towards the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. Once again, images from just moments ago. The journey continues. We will continue to follow this live here in teleSUR English as we bring you, as we have done for the past days, everything that has to do with the consequences and the impacts following a day that reshaped the current situation in the region, a day in which the imperialist forces of the United States decided to lead a bomb attack against a sovereign nation of South America's Venezuela. And we have been seeing not only the direct consequences, the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, but also the way in which Venezuela continues to maintain its institutionality, continues to maintain its social life. And now we're seeing one of the other key actors at this moment, Cuba. Cuba, who gave the 32 lives so dear to the entire Cuban people at this moment in defense of the sovereignty, not only of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, but the entire region as a whole. Cuba, that has for decades been a beacon for the entire region and the world in key values such as the importance of self-determination, the importance of a southern leadership for those southern countries, of South-South cooperation, of resilience in the face of imperialist aggressions. Cuba is now receiving its 32 heroes back home. We were getting to know the 32 collaborators as well, the 32 fallen combatants. Soldado Luis Hidalgo Canals was born in 1968 in Chaparra, the municipality of Jesus Menendez in the province of Las Tunas. An important revolutionary trajectory as a student. He initiated labor life in 1995 in the popular power of Las Tunas. He was in different entities until 2021. He incorporated as a civil worker for the Revolutionary Armed Forces. He had outstanding evaluations of his development and actions at every collaborative effort, and because of these results, he was assigned in special service to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and fell a hero at a tough combat against the imperialist enemy that assaulted Venezuela on January 3rd. We continue to learn a little bit more from these 32 lives, 32 men who were born and raised in Cuba, were assigned for different motives a special mission on Venezuela and gave their lives at this imperialist attack that took place on January 3rd. 32 combatants that are not a number to Cuba and to global South as a whole, that are lives with their own trajectories and families and are now being received and honored and accompanied as we see the caravan that is moving from the international airport where their mortal remains were received. We saw that ceremony just moments ago, and they are now being taken. Their final destination, where the ceremony will continue, is also the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, and a ceremony that will also be open to the public, where the public will be able to pay their respects, to pay their tribute at that moment.
Al amanecer este jueves arribó la aeronave que trasladó.
We learn a little bit more about the lives of these 32 fallen combatants. Soldier Luis Jardines Castro, born in 1966 in the province of Holguín, where he began his studies. He moved with his family to Las Tunas. He graduated in gastronomical services, and he worked in that area until the year 2000. In the year 2005, he was incorporated into the Revolutionary Armed Forces in Holguín. He was a driver, and he had 10 years of service in the armed institution with an outstanding performance, which honored him with the special mission in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and fell in the heroic combat against the U.S. military forces that attacked Venezuela on January 3rd. We're looking at images from Havana. They are at this moment in the capital city. Again, we are looking on screen at this trajectory, the journey that is taken the mortal remains of this 32 fallen combatants that Cuba is now receiving at their homeland from the airport into the city of Havana, and now they are traveling through that capital city. They're heading towards the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the ceremony, the official ceremony, will continue paying honor and respect to the lives of these 32 Cuban heroes, and where the ceremony will also be open to the public, where the public will be able to be there and pay their respect as well. We continue to look at these images from one of the main avenues in Havana as the bodies of the 32 fallen soldiers, the members of Cuba's Revolutionary Armed Forces that have been assigned for different reasons, as we have been seeing, with different trajectories, a special mission in the sister nation of Venezuela. They were there on the attack of January 3rd, an unprecedented attack from the imperialist nation against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and they fell in their duty, honoring their commitment to the defense of not only their homeland Cuba, but their sister nation Venezuela, and the sovereignty of the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. We were saying before also that all of the 32 heroes, ranging from different ages, were awarded, were upgraded in their military ranks post-mortem, in recognition also of their military duty. We continue going over some of the lives, the names, to getting to know the histories that lay behind a number, 32 heroes that are coming back to Cuba. Sergeant Rafael Moreno Font was born in 1990 in Holguín. He had an outstanding trajectory as a student. He initiated his work life as a civil worker of the Revolutionary Armed Forces in the military sector of Cueto before he was moved towards the service unit of the military region of Holguín. Let's listen to a little bit of what is happening at this moment.
Sangre yoruba de rebelde libertad, que jamás la oscuridad nos arrancará, Martí, que Chávez estaba allí peleando junto a Fidel y al machete en un corcel. en la patria de Simón. Cuba ha sembrado la gloria, regó con sangre la historia que nace del corazón. Hoy acurruca un sillón.
Sumamos a
We're looking at images from Havana. We were saying, as this is the day of glory and honor, the day of Cuba commemorating, honoring, paying tribute to the 32 fallen combatants, the 32 members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces that gave their life in defense of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, as they were part of the U.S. imperialist attack of January 3rd against the Bolivarian nation. Combatants that have been placed on a special mission for different accounts on the sister nation. They happened to be there at the moment of the brutal imperialist attack that marked a moment in time that crossed a new red line in the imperialist offenses against the region, and in the fulfillment of their duties, they gave their life in defense of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Now we are seeing the mortal remains of those 32 Cuban heroes. They have arrived at this moment at the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba. We have been seeing and following the entire journey as they arrived at the international airport Jose Marti. They traveled through the city of Havana, and at this moment we are seeing images. These are images from just moments ago, and they are proceeding to a new step, a new moment in this ceremony. Let's recall that the tribute and ceremony will continue and will also be open to the public for the people to be able to express their condolences, to pay tribute to the fallen soldiers. 32 heroes, 32 different stories. We were learning some of them before that led them, some from very active and outstanding deeds within different areas of Cuba, within the Revolutionary Military Armed Forces themselves, different reasons for which these 32 combatants were placed in special service in Venezuela. And fate decided that they gave their lives for the defense of the project that unites Cuba and Venezuela against the imperialist forces. We're looking at the mortal remains at this moment that are being placed at the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces in Havana as they arrived after a journey through the main avenues, Bullero's one of them, from the international airport. And they are now reaching their destination for the ceremony that continues today, and that will also be open to the public so that the population be able to pay homage and pay their respects to these fallen combatants. This at the main building of the MINFAR, the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. The open ceremony will begin at 10 a.m. local time in Cuba. And we are looking at their mortal remains arriving at the place at this moment. A day of mourning and a day of glory, as we were saying. As we see the images, their names, we were learning some of the facts of their lives, who they were, the 32 heroes that gave their life for Cuba and for Venezuela.
Compañeros de lucha, a sus compañeros de armas, a sus compañeros de...
We continue looking at the images. Let's recall as we see the workers and official members also paying the respects present at this ceremony. The 32 heroes that fell in the U.S. attack against Venezuela have now arrived. Their mortal remains have now arrived at the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces. As we see their faces, their names, this act with which their homeland, Cuba, is honoring them before its own population and before the world as well. As we see the skyline of Havana, a central point in the Cuban capital in which they are honoring these 32 fallen combatants. We see Marty's Memorial at the image as well, right next to the Minfar, as we were saying, where we were seeing the images right now. The Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, where the 32 mortal remains have just arrived, where the population will be able to pay their respects. These are images from just moments ago, just before the heroes were received at the Revolutionary Armed Forces Ministry. We were saying that this was an important day for Cuba in their honoring, in their tribute to their fallen heroes. We were also saying that this speaks to the importance that Cuba has for decades. Since the triumph of the revolution in 1959 stood for the defense not only of its own self-determination, but also for the self-determination and defense of the entire global South, and in particular, the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. Today is a day in which that becomes clear and becomes evident for Cuba itself and for the entire world. Also a day in which the solidarity aspect, so key and core to Cuban values and what Cuba has maintained at an international scene. Let's listen to some music that speaks to the importance of today, the solidarity between the nations, and the resilience that both people, Cuba and Venezuela, maintain at this time, in which Cuba is honoring those 32 fallen soldiers that gave their life against the U.S. attack on Venezuela on January 3rd.
En la patria de Simón, Cuba ha sembrado la gloria, regó con sangre la historia que nace del corazón. Hoy acurruca un sillón, llanto, beso de una madre, pero aunque el dolor taladre, sueños despiertos de un hijo, la patria le da cobijo al dolor ciego de un padre. Cuba se levanta entera, Cuba recibe el valor, Cuba viste del color digno de nuestra bandera. Fue inmensa nuestra trinchera en la desigual batalla, donde la sucia metralla tembló al ver nuestro heroísmo, y al pecho del socialismo le ha nacido otra medalla. El mundo sabe en verdad que los hijos de mi Cuba tienen la sangre yoruba de rebelde libertad, que jamás la oscuridad nos arrancará. Martí, que Chávez estaba allí peleando junto a Fidel, y al machete en un corcel se oyó gritar a un mambí. Cuba se levanta entera, Cuba recibe el valor. ¡Viva Cuba! En el silencio profundo se ha sembrado una canción que viaja por este mundo directo hacia el corazón. Partieron hacia el deber sin pedir nada mañana, solo la luz de creer en tierra bolivariana. No digan que se perdieron, ni que los venció el olvido. Son la sangre que pusieron en el surco agradecido. Nombres cubiertos de gloria que la muerte no deshace, son el pulso de la historia, del futuro renace. Cambiaron la vida entera por defender la verdad, sin esperar la quimera de la inmortalidad. El hombre de verde olivo se hace eterno en su bondad, manteniendo siempre vivo el sol de la libertad. Dicen que el héroe no muere si se honra su memoria, y aunque el disparo nos hiere, hoy se agiganta su historia. Será que la necedad de ser fiel no tiene precio. No digan que se perdieron, ni que los venció el olvido. Son la sangre que...
Some of the songs that speak to the resilience of Cuba, the resilience of Venezuela at this moment, a day of honor and a day of glory for the 32 fallen combatants that are now being received. We are looking at images from moments ago. This when Cuba received the 32 members of the Revolutionary Armed Forces that gave their lives on the day of the attacks from the United States against Venezuela, that gave their lives in honor of their special mission in collaboration with the sister nation of Venezuela, and that were victims alongside the over 100 victims accounted for in the Bolivarian nation of the U.S. attacks that were perpetrated on January 3rd and that led to the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. We were learning from some of them as we continue to see images. Let's recall, these are images from just moments ago. The mortal remains of the 32 fallen combatants arrived at the international airport José Martí. They were received with all honors. There were words from the Minister of the Interior of Cuba highlighting their effort, the importance of their deed, the importance of their defense, not only of Cuba but of Venezuela in that effort of solidarity. And they were now and afterwards taken to the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Cuba. What we're seeing as are images from just moments ago of the journey as those 32 bodies of Cuban heroes were taken from one place to the other. We were also learning from some of those lives, some of these stories behind the names. For example, soldier Sandy Amita Lopez, born in 1988 in Havana, with an outstanding performance as a student who linked study and work together as he was also accomplishing the study of the workers and rural life. He participated as part of the reserves at Operation Cawairan, and in 2021 he incorporated to the work of the Revolutionary Armed Forces as an operary, where he was highlighted for the effort and for the dedication that he gave to teamwork. As a result of these duties, in 2025 he was assigned on special service in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and fell in combat, victim of that aggression that was led by the United States against Venezuela. Images in this case, again, from just moments ago, from the Ministry of the Revolutionary Armed Forces, as the mortal remains of these 32 heroes, of whom we've been getting to know a little bit of their stories, what led them here and what led them to that moment in which they gave their life in combat against the U.S. attack in a defense of the sovereignty of Cuba and Venezuela together as sister nations in that effort of solidarity. These are images of the Ministry of Revolutionary Armed Forces in minutes at 10 a.m. local time in Cuba, the open ceremony at the ministry headquarters would begin, with the people of the Cuban nation being able to pay their respects, participate in the day in which Cuba is honoring their 32 heroes. We're saying a day of honor and glory as Cuba is paying homage to these 32 combatants. We followed that journey, and the ceremonies will continue as the people can also pay tribute to these 32 men who gave their lives for Venezuela and for Cuba, for Latin American region as a whole. We'll continue giving you all the information in this and other relevant topics as always. So stay tuned with teleSUR English.